You know, your fingerprint, your face, the pattern in your eye, these aren't just parts of you. They're unique keys. In this explainer, we're going to dive into the really fascinating world of biometric security and see how the right key is chosen for the right lock, especially when it comes to protecting our most sensitive data.
Okay, so let's get right into it. At the heart of, well, any kind of security, there's this fundamental trade-off: security versus convenience. The dream is always to find that perfect balance, because if you crank one all the way up, the other one usually takes a nosedive. Think about it. A system that's as secure as Fort Knox might be a total nightmare to use every day, but a super easy one? Probably not that secure. It's a constant balancing act.
So how do we actually measure this balance? It really boils down to two key ideas. First, you've got the false acceptance rate, or FAR. This is the big one. This is when the system messes up and lets the bad guy in, a huge security breach. Then you have the false rejection rate, or FRR. This is when the system locks you out, even though you're supposed to have access. It's not a security breach, but man, is it annoying. And here's the kicker. These two are basically on a seesaw. If you make the system super strict to push that FAR down to 0, the FRR almost always goes up, meaning you get locked out more often.
To really see how this plays out in the real world, let's follow an engineer we'll call Alex. We're going to join Alex on their commute into a high-security data center. To get to their desk, Alex has to navigate multiple layers of security, and each one presents a totally different challenge.
So Alice's first hurdle is just the main lobby. Now, the problem here isn't trying to catch a Jason Bourne-level spy. The problem is throughput. You've got thousands of employees trying to get through the doors every single morning, and you can't have a massive line snaking out into the parking lot.
So what's the solution for a high-traffic area like this? Well, it's facial recognition. It's a piece of tech that's pretty much perfectly built to keep people moving.
And why is this the perfect choice here? Because facial recognition is what we call frictionless. You can get scanned while you're literally just walking by. That means you get really high throughput. Now, are there downsides? Of course. You have privacy concerns, and the tech can get tripped up by things like face masks or weird lighting. But for the lobby, speed is king. We're willing to accept a tiny bit more risk to avoid a traffic jam every single day.
And that's really its sweet spot, keeping things flowing in busy areas like a main lobby. In this specific spot, convenience is absolutely the #1 priority.
All right, Alex made it through the lobby. But the next challenge? It's a whole different ballgame. Now Alex has to get into the data hall itself. This is the heart of the whole operation, where all the really sensitive stuff lives. And here, the priority completely flips. Security is everything.
So, to protect this critical zone, the facility uses something much more precise: an iris scan. Alex has to step into this little booth, which is often called a man trap, for this next, much more serious check.
Let's look at the trade-offs now. The huge pro here is mind-blowing accuracy. We're talking an error rate of 1 in 1.5 million. Plus, it's contactless, and the unique pattern in your iris stays the same your entire life. The cons? Well, the hardware is expensive and it's slow. Alex has to physically stop, stand still, and look right into the scanner. But hey, to protect the crown jewels, that's a trade-off the security team is happy to make every single time.
And this goes right back to that seesaw we talked about. For this door, the system is tuned to gladly risk rejecting Alex by mistake, a higher false rejection rate, if it means getting the chance of letting an intruder in, the false acceptance rate, as close to 0 as humanly possible. It's way better to annoy an employee for a second than to accidentally admit a threat.
But you might be wondering, what if a really clever intruder tries to fool the system? You know, with a high-res photo of someone's eye or a fake silicone finger. For the absolute most secure areas, there's a technology designed specifically to defeat that kind of spoofing.
And this is vascular or vein scanning. This is so cool. It uses near-infrared light to map the unique pattern of veins inside your hand. But its killer feature is pure genius. It has to detect blood flow. It needs to know it's looking at a living, breathing person, which makes it nearly impossible to trick with a fake. Super expensive, yes, but for protecting the highest value targets, it's a total game changer.
So, Alex is finally inside the data hall, but the journey's not quite over. See, Alex doesn't need access to every server, just one specific cabinet out of hundreds, and that brings us to the final, most granular layer of security.
And for this job, we turn to a very familiar friend, the good old fingerprint scanner built right into the handle of that specific server rack.
So why this choice? Honestly, it all comes down to practicality. Fingerprint scanners are cheap and they're small, which is a huge deal when you need to buy and install 500 of them on every single rack handle.
Now, the downside is they can fail if a technician's hands are dirty or wet, and, hygiene can be a concern. But for this particular job, the low cost and small size win out.
It's simply the perfect tool for securing individual points of access on a massive scale, whether it's an office door or, in Alex's case, a single server cabinet.
Okay, so Alex is finally at the server, ready to work. But after being scanned 3 different ways, a really important question probably comes to mind. It's one you might be asking yourself right now. With all this biometric data flying around, is my personal identity actually safe?
Let's tackle that one head on because we need to debunk a really common myth. A lot of people imagine that somewhere on a server there's a folder with a high-resolution picture of your face or your fingerprint. If that were true, a data breach would be an absolute catastrophe. But that's just not how it works.
So here's what actually happens. The system creates something called a template. Step 1, the reader scans your feature, let's say your fingerprint. Step 2, an algorithm immediately turns that image into a unique mathematical string of numbers. And step 3, this is the most important part. The original image is permanently deleted. It's gone, forever. It's never even stored. From that point on, the system only ever compares the math, not the picture.
Let me just say that again, because if you take away one thing about biometric privacy, this is it. The original image is never stored. A hacker can't steal a picture of your fingerprint from the server because one doesn't exist, and there's no way to reverse engineer that string of numbers back into the image.
So, let's bring Alex's whole journey back together and see how every piece of this security puzzle fits perfectly. It really is all about picking the right scan for the right job.
Let's just recap the whole trip. In the main lobby, the big constraint was speed for thousands of people, so facial recognition was the obvious choice. At the data hall entrance, the constraint was extreme security and the need to be contactless, which led directly to the iris scan. And finally, at the server rack handle, the constraints were all about limited space and low cost per unit, making the fingerprint scanner the perfect fit. Every choice was a deliberate decision, balancing that core trade-off between security and convenience.
From unlocking our phones just by looking at them to walking through a building without even breaking stride, biometric tech is becoming more and more invisible in our lives. And that leads to a final, really important question for all of us. As this technology becomes completely seamless, what are we, as a society, really willing to trade for that promise of ultimate convenience?